I'm just calling it like I see it, agree with me or not. But the NFL media loves those linebackers that have hustle and intelligence for the game and they play hard, that are white, that maybe lack athleticism, but those grinder type of guys. They love linebackers like that. Let's face it, a lot of fans do too. We like those guys. We gravitate to those guys sometimes. It's just the truth of the matter. Every once in a while, we like to see those dominant white boys that maybe aren't the best athletes, but they do all these different things and still become very productive and sometimes dominant NFL players at the linebacker position. The media gravitates to those guys. Like I said, I think the fans do too, especially when they have cool names. And when it comes to cool names in this year's draft, one of the coolest has to be Scooby Wright. Scooby Dooby Doo. I mean, you can think of the marketing possibilities, talking about get him a Scooby snack and all this other shit. And he, in a lot of ways, has been that guy that the media was trying to anoint, that fans were, really getting behind at the college level. But now he's decided to declare after an injury-shortened 2015 season for the NFL draft. And now we're just going to see whether or not he can translate his game to the NFL level. And I must say, I have truly significant concerns about him. He's 6 foot, 240 pounds. The junior, I watch him and I sit there and say, okay, I see why people like him. This was a guy that was a very productive player when he was on the field for Arizona. He's got very good football intellect, a guy that has good awareness in terms of understanding where he needs to be on the football field, a guy that has good instincts in the sense of I think he recognizes plays well and in some cases, even more importantly, recognizes what is coming before it actually happens because with his lack of quickness and explosiveness and athleticism and many other things, he has to be able to read those plays to be able to get there quicker. He has to be able to anticipate them. And I will say, in the interest of fairness, that I saw good anticipation skills, good ability to read the plays, good ability to read and understand the quarterback's eyes, to understand offensive formations. I saw that out of Scooby Wright. Here's a guy, again, that when you talk about him, there are certain things that you just know he doesn't have, so he has to have other things. And one thing he has to have is a relentless motor and effort level. And he does have that. This is a guy that I always thought played hard. This was a guy that I always thought you were getting the 100% best that you would get out of him on that particular day. You like those hustle players, those try-hard type of linebackers, those guys that are willing to mix it up, the guys that are never going to give up. They're never going to quit on a play. And Scooby Wright shows you that. Now, one thing I liked about the way he was utilized at Arizona, he was used a lot as a blitzer. It's something that could come in handy for him at the NFL level as he's trying to find a niche, find a role, be able to stick on an NFL roster. He's got more experience as an edge rusher and as a pass rusher, and in particular as a blitzer, than a lot of the other inside linebackers in this 2016 NFL draft class. Another thing he does pretty well is he plays with really good pad level. Now, he's already only about 6 foot to begin with, but he does a good job of not getting up too high. He does a good job of keeping his shoulder pads low, his knees bent, and you like that type of guy, especially with that effort level that he has. Sometimes he can just make things happen just because, again, of that effort going along with the awareness and the instincts. But man, oh man, when you watch this guy on film, you see the media buzz and you see the hype and you see the production level in 2014 and you think that this guy is going to be something, and he's just not. You think that he's going to be a whole hell of a lot better of a player than he actually is. I mean, for a guy that has this much name recognition, this much buzz and hype about him, he's just not that good, and he has flaws everywhere in his game. We'll start off with the obvious one, speed and athleticism. This is never going to be a guy that wins anything when it comes to an athletic skills contest as a linebacker. But even for him, he's only 6 foot, 240 pounds. You'd like a guy that was a little bit quicker, a little bit more sudden, and had more speed than a Scooby Wright. And he just doesn't have it. Frankly, I was surprised he ran a 4.9 in the 40 at the combine. I really was. I didn't even think he had that speed in him. He's slow of foot, and he plays slow of foot. And it's nice that he has some ability to understand where he needs to be, recognizing the play ahead of time. But you got to be able to get there. And Scooby Wright a lot of times just can't get there, especially once the play goes outside of his little phone booth confined area. Once he has to start lateral pursuit, you can forget about it. He's going to be out of the play almost every single time. And when you talk about a guy like this, and you talk about that he's not very big. Obviously, size is going to be a thing. Length is going to be a thing, but it's more than just that to me. If you're not going to have speed and athleticism, you got to at least be strong. You got to play strong. And Scooby Wright just doesn't play very strong and just doesn't play very physical. He tries hard and he plays hard, but he doesn't hit hard and he's not very physical. And for a guy that's lacking in this area, you would expect him to compensate in another area, and that compensation just isn't there. He just does not play very strong at all. He does not anchor well in the running game whatsoever. He struggles like all hell to shed any blockers. But what is most in particular disappointing to me as I watched him on film was just how bad of a tackler this guy was. You're not going to make a bunch of spectacular high-flying sideline to sideline and goal line to end zone type of plays. You're going to be a straight-ahead, phone booth type of confined area player, and you lack the strength to be able to anchor. You lack the ability to shed blocks. You lack the strength to hold up and be physical. And you're a piss-poor tackler. I can't tell you how many times Scooby Wright had tacklers go right through his arm tackles, and he was out of position, and he was not in a good way in terms of trying to set up to tackle the guy. Now, part of that could just be because, again, of that natural lack of quickness, athleticism, and overall speed. He takes bad angles because he thinks he's quicker and faster than he actually is. So sometimes, yes, that could play a role. But even in general, when he is squared up and he is in a position where he can make a solid fundamental tackle or a big hit, far too often he does neither. Typically the hustle linebackers, the guys that lack in certain areas, in size and athleticism, make up for it in other areas. Zach Thomas made up for it in a lot of other areas. Tackling was one of them. Scooby Wright doesn't make up for it with his tackling skill. Frankly, he's very piss poor. He's one of the worst linebackers I've graded this year in terms of his tackling skills, or in this case, a lack of tackling skills. I mean, when you look at him on film, where is he really going to make any dent at all in coverage? I mean, a pure two-down player if there ever was one, because he doesn't have the ability to hold up in man coverage, and even in zone coverage. I don't know that his awareness or instincts are that incredible. And then you're asking him to cover any type of open space at all. That's where that lack of quickness, speed, and athleticism comes into play. And I look at him in terms of an NFL position too, and I say, Jesus Christ, where are you going to play him? Maybe you play him as a 4-3 strong side linebacker, but you want those guys to be pretty good against the run, and Scooby Wright isn't. Yes, he has some experience as a blitzer, and maybe he can make it there, but he's not long. He's most certainly not strong. So I'd really have some concerns about him holding up outside. And part of the thing about an outside linebacker is you got to play them some in coverage at least some of the time. And he's just not good in coverage. Then you're talking about playing him in a 4-3 as an inside linebacker, as a middle linebacker. Child, please. He just doesn't have the ability to get sideline to sideline. And you have to have that out of a 4-3 middle linebacker, in my opinion. And then when you look at him in a 3-4, he's not big enough, long enough, strong enough, or explosive enough nearly to be a 3-4 edge rusher. So then you're looking at playing him inside as a 3-4 backer. But again, that's where that lack of strength will really come into play, because now he'd be taking on even more blockers, and you could just take him completely out of the equation. On top of that, you talk about a guy that missed a majority of his last college season due to a knee injury. Some people are surprised that he declared when he did. I'm really not, because who's to say he doesn't go back and get injured again? What was he really going to do in 2016 that was going to improve his draft stock anything more for the 2017 NFL draft? I just don't see it. I mean, this is a guy overall, you're talking about in terms of an NFL comparison. I've seen some comparisons to Chris Borland, and I think those are ridiculous. So I thought Borland's awareness was better. His instincts were better. He was a much better tackler, and he was a better athlete than Scooby Wright. No question about it. Borland wasn't a great athlete, but he was a much better athlete and much more instinctive and aware overall than a Scooby Wright. And he was a little bit better in coverage than Scooby Wright. That's for damn sure. I look at maybe somebody like Shane Scoff, if you remember him coming out of Stanford, a guy that ran 5.0 something in the 40 at the combine. Just a guy that when you played him in a small confined area, he was effective when you asked him to go straight ahead. But anything sideline to sideline, you could forget about it. Not very strong, not very athletic. Really could struggle to hold up at the point of attack. Played hard, but that was about it. What type of use do you really have for those guys at the NFL level? And when I look at Scooby Wright, I see a guy major production in 2014, got even bigger media hype as the season went along heading into 2015, but don't believe the hype. The film just doesn't match the hype, especially with the guy that missed the majority of his last college football season. His stats were really inflated by his system that he was in and the way he was utilized. Almost everything they asked him to do was straight ahead. And even when it came to straight ahead, he still failed to make nearly the amount of plays that he should have based off of the responsibilities or lack of responsibilities he had within that scheme. Even his strengths, I don't think are all that particularly great. Talking about awareness, it's adequate, but it's not exceptional. His instincts are good, but they're not great. There's still times he got fooled badly by play fakes. There were still times he was looking in one direction and the ball carrier's heading the other way. His motor is good, but I don't think it's otherworldly. I mean, it's probably his single biggest trait is his effort level. He tries hard. But, as a blitzer, I mean, yeah, he got there sometimes, but how often did he really get there? And, again, you're talking about a guy, if you're not going to be athletic, you've got to be strong. He's not athletic and he's not strong. And if you're not going to be athletic, you're going to have limitations there. And you're not going to be very strong, so you're going to have limitations there. You at least got to be able to wrap up the God-blessed ball carrier, and he can't even do that. So I'm looking at him and all of these weaknesses and all of these flaws and asking myself, where does he play? I asked flat out, what about Scooby Wright's game translates to the NFL level? I mean, in all seriousness, what the hell really translates? Like I said, he's got a cool name. Okay, that translates, the marketing possibilities, what have you. But you think he has better football IQ than he actually does. You think he's more productive than he actually is. Because I can't tell you how many tackles he missed. And if he had any type of athleticism or quickness at all, how many more plays he could have made that he just didn't make. On top of the fact that Arizona knew his limitations as a player and asked him to play in just a small couple of yard window. And did things to keep blockers off of him and everything else. He just wasn't good. He's just not that good. He found a way to be productive in college because of the lack of responsibility he had and because of the system that he played in. Well, when we're talking about spending a first-round pick on him, fuck out of here. Even when we're talking about spending a day 2 pick on him in the NFL draft, get the fuck out of here. And frankly, when talking about Scooby Wright, I'd be surprised at this point if he was even drafted. To me, he is nothing more than a 7th-round talent at best. And even with, looking at him and you say, well, he's a productive college player, maybe he's got so many flaws and so many deficiencies in so many key areas. He's going to take so much work. Why would you even bother? I don't even see where he's a valuable special teams contributor at the NFL level. If he gets drafted, he's getting drafted off of name recognition and the hopes that he could translate even a portion of that college production to the NFL level, and that is it. If you want an inside linebacker that can actually play at the NFL level, in my opinion, based off of what I've seen out of him the past couple of years, you can find many, many other better options in this draft than Scooby Wright, I assure you. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not drafted at all. Frankly, I don't even know if he should be drafted.